Thank you very, very much for coming. I am really happy to see everybody here. I'm really pleased by the interest in this whole thing. I think this is for the folks who have been working in this area, you know it's a really positive way to deal with some complex issues, and a little difficult sometimes to get going. But once you do, it has some good benefits. And really appreciate everybody's interest and everybody's willingness to come to Washington in this terrible weather and put up with this. But again, thanks. And I have some opening, sort of logistical stuff to do. But before I start, I want to point out a couple people who are key to this, the way the meeting's going to go in a successful conclusion. One is Stacy Smith, and there's Stacy over there. And then Julie Shapiro back here. And they are with the Keystone Policy Group, and they're facilitators for the Honeybee Health Coalition. And they're the ringleaders, I guess you could call it, for this meeting. And will be, sort of the infrastructure. Also, Dave Epstein. Where's Dave? Dave's out in the hall working as usual. Dave is critical in getting this facility and providing the facility for this meeting, and deserves a lot of thanks for all the work he does. There he is, and there's Dave. And there's a whole lot of people on the steering committee, which we'll recognize tomorrow. We don't want to spend that much time today. We have a lot of folks who worked real hard on this, and we all appreciate it. Just a couple things. All the plenary sessions are going to be recorded. The plenary sessions are in this room. They're all going to be recorded, video recording. The MP3 primer and the engaging stakeholder sessions are also going to be recorded. And those recordings will be used as resources for folks who couldn't come to the meeting and for supplementary meetings. And they'll be made available for viewing and download from a website following Symposium. I think all the speakers were contacted and they all were okay with that. If you don't want to be, if you're a participant and you don't want to be recorded, asking a question or making a statement, just don't speak into a microphone. Then you won't be recorded. And if you have any concerns, speak to Stacy or Julie. In your packet, you have an agenda, and in the agenda is the second page, a set of ground rules, which are just sort of standard ground rules for these kinds of meetings and pretty straightforward. Don't necessarily need to go through them. There's also some information about lunch, which we'll talk about later. The purpose of this meeting is to bring together all the participants who are involved in this enterprise. And since states are at different stages, the meeting is designed to give states and the people working in those states and with the stakeholders working with the states developing these MP3s, the opportunity to work and to explore ways to go, to move the ball down the field, to go further than where they're right now. And they'll also have an opportunity to learn together too. Let's see, I think. And then, of course, we want to thank all the speakers for their time. This is all done on people's own time to come here. And of course, the sponsors, NASDA, the Honeybee Health Coalition, EPA, and USDA. So, anything else you want to add, Stacy, to that? Okay. Any questions? Talk to Stacy and Julie, or I'll help if I can. So, our opening session, we have some distinguished speakers to come sort of kick the thing off. And the first speaker is the director of the Illinois State Department of Agriculture, Ted McKinney. And Ted McKinney is coming up. Ted McKinney was sworn in as the director of the Indiana State Department of Agriculture in January of 2014 by Governor Mike Pence. Prior to joining the Indiana State Department of Agriculture, he was director of global corporate affairs for Elanco Animal Health, a subsidiary of Eli Lilly and Company. Director McKinney grew up on a family grain and livestock farm in Tipton, Indiana, joined Dow AgroSciences, and has served in a variety of corporate affairs positions. He's co-chair of the National FFA Convention's Local Organizing Committee for Indianapolis, member of the Indiana State Fair Commission, served on boards and executive committees for Washington, D.C.-based International Food Information Council, and for the International Federation of Animal Health. 10-year 4-H member, former Indiana State FFA officer, and graduate of Purdue, which we've talked about already, and received a BS degree in agricultural economics in 1981, and he serves as chair of the Plant Agriculture and Pesticide Regulation Committee for NASDA. So welcome.
Thank you, Steve. Well, Steve, thank you so much, and thank all of you for inviting me, but also for being here. In the introduction, you heard that I chair a committee at NASDA that would have, as part of its portfolio, this very topic. So yes, that is one reason I'm here. But from the heart and the head, I wanted to be here anyway, because I am a huge believer in the cause and the issue that we're addressing here. And so if at minimum it rejuices my batteries to go do the right things in Indiana that lead to strengthening our bee health, our pollinators, and all that goes with that, then it will have been a very, very wise use of my time. So thank you for being here. And I want to thank again, I suspect most of you as leaders have participated in organizing a conference or conferences, large and small. This is not easy to do. I mean, think of all the details. And so I just also want to thank the host committee and all of you who put so much time into making this happen. And I think it's incumbent upon us to walk away with some really hard, concrete kinds of things to make sure that their efforts and your time were not in vain, but rather productive. So thank you to all of those of you that organized this. And our co-hosts, USDA, EPA, the Honey Bee Health Coalition. This is really, really important work. Well, as was mentioned, I'm very honored to be the State Director of the Department of Agriculture in Indiana. It is my time to do public service, and I'm absolutely unequivocally loving it. Yeah, I took a hell of a pay cut when I left the corporate world, but you know, when you can put your head and your heart into something like this, among many, many other issues in the department, it makes you feel very good, and you get up out of bed in the morning with a click in your heels, and I feel that way today. I think we have great opportunity to do great things out of this. I think most of you know NASDA, but if you don't, NASDA is the organization that represents the directors, secretaries, and commissioners of agriculture across the many states and provinces. Each state has a different title, and that's why we go through that long litany of commissioners, secretaries, directors. I want you to know, as part of my role to take this conference and what I'm sharing with you here today very seriously, I have called many of the other states. In some cases, I talk to my counterparts. More often than not, I talk to those whose job and responsibility it is to implement these state management plans. So yes, I'll share with you some things that we're very proud of in Indiana, but I hope I'm coming with a much broader view, having taken the time and having spent some quality time on the phone with my counterparts. And I think you know the departments of ag are responsible for a long, wide list of things going on, this being one. I want you to know why I'm here in addition to my NASDA role. I've thought a lot about this. I think it's very important that each of us examine why are we here. What's the reason? And I'll give you my 3 or 4. The first one is to shore up best practices and plans in the states. I've always believed this, and my goodness, if I heard anything from my counterparts, it was to say, states are different. Habitats are different. Cropping and crops are different. All kinds of things are different. This is not a homogeneous nation. There's this thing called cotton in the South. Don, did I say that right? Was that what you want me to say? Yes. And we are well known in the Midwest for corn and soybeans and some wheat. Our only cotton is in the greenhouses at Dow AgriSciences, I think. But we have got to shore up the best practices and tailor them. Secondly, to doubly ensure that these programs are voluntary, long pause, voluntary and cooperative in nature. We're at a time, particularly with these raucous debates as we have a presidential election, where the more extreme you are, one way or the other, makes you popular. I hope we do not take a lesson from that. If we are not cooperating, and I mean cooperating fully, we're not going to get done what we need to get done here. The third is to regenerate enthusiasm for this important initiative. I'll be honest, probably not unlike you. I got 1,000 things on my plate to do, notwithstanding family and an occasional desire to read a World War II book. Yes. So we've got 1,000 things to do, and if we're not keeping this at the fore somewhere, we're not going to fulfill this voluntary measure that I described at the front. And yes, and I promised myself and colleagues that I would be always respectful and diplomatic, but I do hope we do not race to regulate. And I heard that there is a distinct feeling that that might be the case. So that's why I'm here, and I'm going to be here for the entire duration. I may slip away for a lunch or something but I want to be here and I want to take all this in, and I, for one, will promise that I'm taking this back to Indiana, and I'll share this with all my NASDA colleagues so that we can recharge their batteries and their enthusiasm to do right by our pollinators. So to underscore the importance of the managed pollinator plans, I'll call it MP3, it's important we contribute 1 out of every 3 bites of food we eat, and they provide pollination services. It's a big damn deal. It really is. We've got to do right by our bees and anything else that does the pollination. I think you know that USDA estimates the value of insect pollination to be over $16 billion annually. And when you stop and think about it, it's true. You think about how many crops need pollination. And about 3/4 of that is attributable to honeybees. So let's take care of the honeybees. I'm all in. And then worldwide, the contribution of bees, other insects, contributes to human food valued at approximately $190 billion. All that is to underscore what I said earlier. It is a very, very important thing. And when I think that all of the people in this room are probably going to have more to do with doing right by our honeybees and our pollinators than anybody else in the US of A, there's a lot of power and influence, or at least there needs to be, in this room. I want to share with you one story on what we're doing in Indiana to illustrate this. It was early 2014 when I was asked to serve in this role, and I gladly accepted. And you may think that I had to get all kinds of things going. I did. We had legislative things. We had issues. We needed to be out talking to our producers more. There was an imbalance on my board, or on my senior staff. There were more IU people than Purdue people. I had to correct the imbalance. Now, I say that as a favor to my EPA friends because I know you've got a lot of IU SPIA people there. I was successful. We outnumber them by 1, but I had to right the ship. And then the first lady of our state calls and said, "Ted, I have heard about these honeybee collapse things." Well, guess what my first order of business was after getting the ship righted on my balance? Working with the first lady to get a honeybee hive at the first residence, at the governor's residence. It was a pleasure. And I went through a microcosm of what I think we're all doing here, and that was, how do you message this? How do you get it in? How do you take care of it? I mean, Mrs. Pence and certainly the governor are too busy. They couldn't do it. So how do we orchestrate this so we have a vibrant honeybee hive that kids that visit the residence or the various social functions they have, they can tell a good story. So I got to do, in about a 7-day crash course, what we're doing over the period of months and years. And I will say it was successful. It was amazing what education and cooperation can do. We brought in the honeybee folks. We brought in our beloved Indiana State Chemist Office who regulate pesticides in the state. We worked with Mrs. Pence and her staff. And when we had the unveiling of the first hive, and that is what it's called, the messages were right. We did not race to denigrate pesticides. We talked about that. We talked about the importance of habitat. And we went through with the greenskeeper what to do, what not to do, when to apply, when not to apply. I hope, and I'm not bragging on this, I'm just saying I got a crash course. We have the benefit of a little more time to do this, but I hope that's the spirit in which we can undertake this. Now, What I have learned in that 7 days and since, that there are many reasons for these problems with honeybee hive collapses. I'm told and read that parasites are the biggest reason. If there's a debate on that, I'd like to hear the other view, but that's what I have read. So that and diseases, diet, nutrition, lack of genetic diversity, habitat loss, and other environmental stressors. We're focused big time on that in our state. I'll show you an example in a moment. Yes, pesticides can, if not managed properly, beekeeping management, and the possibility of any interaction of all the above. That's my belief. So we've got to then take a holistic approach, not a rifle shot approach, to deal with all of these things. So I'm not telling you something you don't know. This is a complex and big issue, and we've got to work it. I can tell you that at least based on my many calls, and yes, I did call the states that seem to be doing very, very well, even in the lead on this. Mississippi was a very good one, a couple of others. And there are some states that are far out ahead, and by golly, I want to learn from them, and we want to take their and our and other good ideas and share those with our brethren and sisters in other states. We want to, and we will do that. Numerous states have completed their MP3. We'll discuss that. We'll hear from them later today and tomorrow, and I, for one, will be listening intently. So, in addition to what happened at the first residence with the first hive, there's 2 or 3 other things. You heard me say that we're focusing, not entirely, but more heavily on habitat. So let me show you what we're doing. Everybody's got to have a brochure. We're pumping this out wherever we can, and this is simply a Hoosier roadside heritage. It talks about native species that are pollinators, and we're encouraging this wherever we can. And we've got partners out the yin-yang. This is the road sign that we're putting on roadsides or anywhere there might be habitat that we don't want mowed or sprayed. Notice it starts with pollinator habit. We could have said, do not mow or spray, and not explained why. We wanted to start with people embracing why they should not mow or spray, and it is a pollinator habit. And yes, we have a smiling bee and a smiling butterfly. Back to that spirit of cooperation. So, that's one other thing. All kinds of information sharing and education. In our case, the pesticides are managed through a pesticide review board. I sat on that board many, many years ago. Terrific collaboration. Everybody is represented. Holistic, collaborative. Yes, they've got a task to do, and I think that they're doing. And then, of course, pollinator protection as best we can. The point of all this is we have got so many great examples across the states that we need to embrace all those and take that forward. That's what I want to see. And the strength of the MP3 model is its flexibility, the ability to tailor to different states, different cropping, different habitat, different weather conditions, etc. So, it is really with that spirit of communication and collaboration that I think has brought us here today. At least that was the answer I was given when I asked different people, so what's the reason? What's the raison d'etre of this particular conference? So I'm going to leave you with 3 things. When I was with Elanco Animal Health, a division of Lilly, we got great training that says people can't tend to remember 4 or 5 or 6 things, they can remember 3. So I'm going to leave you with my 3 sort of whys. I would ask, no, I would beg all of you that we get these plans finished up and implemented and practiced, because I think that's where the proof is that voluntary and state initiation can and will help, and do it. Secondly, let's do it in a spirit of cooperation. One quick example. Many of you are well aware that there's this whole brouhaha over water quality and administration and regulation. I want you to know that I'm very proud that in Indiana we have one of the most harmonious relationships as we deal with things like the Western Lake Erie Basin. The feds, the states, the locals, the Nature Conservancy, the Farm Bureau. It's the most homogeneous and cooperative group I know, and it's water quality, which has been cited as the big demon in some cases. It can work. It can work if we take this spirit of cooperation. So that's the second. And third, and again, with all due respect, I hope we refrain I'll even go so far as to say race away from direct regulation as the first shot to address these issues. I think it can work. Let us have the chance. So, thank you for having me. I'm all in. I hope you all are. And when we gather here in 5 or 10 years, we'll find out that these state plans have worked. Steve, thank you, and all the best to everybody. Appreciate that.
Great talk, appreciate it. Okay, thank you very much. Our next introductory speaker will be Fred Corey with the Tribal Pesticide Program Council. Fred has served as the environmental director for the Aroostook, I hope I pronounced that right, band of Micmacs, northern Maine since 1996, and is responsible for the development and management of all tribal environmental programs. In addition to his work with the Aroostook Band of Micmacs, Fred has served as the National Tribal Environmental Council served on the National Tribal Environmental Council Superfund Working Group, co-chair of the EPA's Forum on State and Tribal Toxics Action, Tribal Affairs Project, and currently serves as the chairman of the Tribal Pesticide Program Council, which is where I know him from. We worked together on a lot of things. And his professional interests include environmental chemistry, tribal risk assessment, and tribal environmental law. So, Fred.
Thank you, Steve. Good morning, everyone. I, too, would like to start out with offering some thanks, especially to my colleague, Jim Mossett, with the 3 affiliated tribes of North Dakota. Unfortunately, he had a health issue and was not able to be here, but he served on the planning committee for the symposium. And I'd also like to extend my thanks to the symposium organizers for all the planning efforts that went into pulling this together. To the EPA tribal team, who is responsible for facilitating tribal participation in the symposium, and to my 10 tribal colleagues who are here in attendance and who are dedicated to protecting pollinators. Since I only have a couple of minutes, I briefly want to discuss one of the key themes that emerged from a tribal pollinator protection workshop that was held in Spokane, Washington last fall. In November, there was approximately 50 tribes from across the country that participated in a tribal pollinator protection workshop. And one of the key issues that arose or that came out of that meeting was that tribes are really concerned about the decline of native pollinators. And native pollinators are incredibly important for maintaining our natural ecosystems, because many native plants or endemic plants to North America only receive pollination from native pollinators, and that's could be due to the unique morphology of the native plants that require an insect or other pollinator that's adapted to provide that service. Or it could be the growth habit or the timing of the flowering, but there could be some unique factors like that that require that native pollinator rather than the European honeybee, which may not be adapted to providing those services for the plants. So therefore, without having our native pollinators, our natural landscape is subject to change, and some of our native endemic plants to North America may actually disappear from the landscape. And why this is so important and relevant to tribes is because the use of native plants for food, medicine, spiritual uses, and craft uses really integral to continuing ancient tribal traditions and customs. So that the tribes have evolved right along with the plants and native pollinators. So if either the native pollinators disappear or the plants, it forces the tribes to change their ancient tribal practices. So therefore, protecting native pollinators not only protects tribal culture and biodiversity, but native pollinators, as was previously mentioned, also provide free pollination services for the agricultural industry. And from what I've read, I understand that there's over 4,000 native bee species in North America, and many of those species are facing some of the same pressures that are being experienced by the managed pollinators and the European honeybee. And I think, as was also earlier recognized, key among the factors that are affecting our pollinators are habitat loss and fragmentation. And again, that's been something that's affecting the European honeybee as well. So I think from a tribal perspective, including habitat protection provisions and encouraging the creation of natural foraging sites as elements in MP3 plans benefits not only the native pollinators, but also our managed pollinators as well. And then in closing, I'd like to leave you an example of, I think, why it's really important to carefully consider the potential impacts of BMPs and other practices that are being developed to protect the European honeybee. One of my tribal colleagues recently noted that for a particular insecticide, one of the recommended BMPs to protect pollinators is to avoid foliar applications and instead apply the pesticide as a soil drench. And from my understanding of the majority of North American native bees, they're actually ground nesting bees. That's the habitat where they're found. So applying a soil drench to the soil, although it may be beneficial for species like the European honeybee, could actually have a negative consequence for ground nesting bees. So, and I know there's a number of other examples like that as well. So I guess the key thing is just as those BMPs are being developed to work with entomologists and others who have that knowledge about some of the unique biology or ecology of the native pollinators, and make sure that something that's intended to have a good result doesn't have an unintended negative consequence. And I guess finally, I'd like to mention a great resource that I came across, and this was developed by the Xerxes Society for Invertebrate Conservation. They've actually developed some guidance that includes some thoughtful recommendations for elements to include in MP3 plans to protect native bees and pollinators. So they've identified some categories of things that some thought should be given to, and you can find that on the Xerxes website. And again, I think it's a great resource. It's not prescriptive, just it has some good ideas for elements that you could consider to strengthen the protection of native bees and pollinators. So I thank you for the opportunity to speak this morning, and I really look forward to engaging in dialogue with everyone over the next day and a half of the symposium. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Fred. The last introductory speaker will be Jim Jones, and Jim is here. Jim serves as the Assistant Administrator for the EPA's Office of Chemical Safety and Pollution Prevention, and is responsible for managing the office which implements the nation's pesticide, toxic, chemical, and pollution prevention laws. Jim's career with EPA spans more than 28 years. He has an MA from the University of California at Santa Barbara and a BA from the University of Maryland, both in economics. And I have to say that Jim and his staff, folks that work with him in this area, have been, very, very, very supportive of the whole concept of MP3s and right in there with the rest of us working on this, and really appreciate that. So, Jim.
Thank you. It's very, very encouraging for me to see the participation that we have here today, tomorrow, I expect, across states, producers, honeybee producers, manufacturers of the chemicals, and all of the stakeholders that ultimately need to be sitting at the table to help us deal with the issues that we are struggling with collectively. And I thank my colleagues Fred and Ted for their comments this morning on the importance of the partnerships that we have with the tribes and the states are also of critical importance to our ability to ultimately get our arms around these issues. Ted, in particular, I want to thank you for your leadership. I think it's of great significance and huge importance that an effort such as this has the enthusiastic leadership of the highest level at a State Department of Agriculture. I think it's going to make an extraordinary difference to our ability to move the ball forward. So really thank you for your leadership and your remarks this morning. I as a Maryland grad, people are always asking me about the ACC and the Big Ten. I am so done with the ACC. I am thrilled to be in the Big Ten. I fully support your idea of getting rid of those IU people and bringing in Purdue people. I may feel different next year, but as of this year, keep it up. We'll see how the tournament goes. So I've been working on this issue for longer than I care to say, and I will say it has more public resonance than any pesticide issue I've worked on in my 25 years doing pesticide work. It is quite remarkable the staying power that this issue has in the public mind right now. I am confident that unless we collectively figure out how to solve the problem, it is going to stay in the public consciousness. And so I think that if we want to move on to other things, it is going to be incumbent upon us to figure out how we are going to solve the problem. I have been doing pesticide regulatory work, as I said, for a very long time, and I have been encouraged by individuals, usually in agriculture, mostly in agriculture. Can't you just let us figure things out? And as a pesticide regulator, that's not always been possible. We've periodically have to step in and dictate, regulate how things get sorted out. One of the things I've been saying about this issue for the past 5 years is this is your golden moment. And actually the MP3 is an expression of that golden moment. It is agriculture's opportunity to solve a problem without the government having to step in and dictating exactly how that's going to happen. It will only actually work if the problem gets solved. And so here it is. This is the moment. That's one of the reasons I'm very excited to see as many stakeholders who are participating, and this is not, that it is fundamentally an agricultural issue. However, it has the potential to impact all 300 million Americans, and actually people not even in the United States. It also involves, one aspect of it involves something that my agency's got regulatory authority over, and that's the pesticide piece of it. I can assure you that any regulation that we do in this space will be science-based. We will bring science to it. But I'm also pretty confident that the solutions, the ultimate solutions, are going to lie within the agricultural community. And I was particularly heartened to hear Ted refer to our beekeepers. When I'm out and about on this issue, and that's not that infrequently, I do not always hear people from agriculture refer to them as our beekeepers. They are our beekeepers. They are your beekeepers. They are part of the agricultural system, and I'm really encouraged to hear someone in leadership in agriculture talk about them as part of the team. Because the only way we're going to solve the problem is if they're treated as part of the team. They're at the table, they're there with their ideas, they're there talking to the producers, the manufacturers, the regulators, the state lead agencies, as equal partners in trying to solve a problem. And so that's why in the MP3 context, we have insisted that the number one thing, in my view, the number one thing is that they be developed in a collaborative way. And that means everybody who's got a stake is sitting at the table with their ideas, being able to be heard, not always agreed with, but to be heard, and that the outcome be the collective view of those who have participated. So I'm very encouraged to see the active participation of the beekeeping community, as well as the producer community, but particularly the states. The Administrator of EPA, Gina McCarthy, who you might think is a rabid regulator, I can assure you that is not how she approaches issues. She often says that one of the most important ways that we in government, broadly, government can solve problems is as a convener. We actually tend to be, government, a very effective convener. That's fundamentally what this is about. We working with our state partners, actually it's really going to be the state lead agencies, are going to be convening parties of diverse and varied perspective to see the degree to which we can come up with ideas to solve a problem. And that is fundamentally what we attempted to do when we laid out the idea of using basically state plans to get our arms around some of the issues associating with honeybee health in the United States. And as Ted said, this is a huge country. This is a vast country that's incredibly diverse and heterogeneous, and the solutions in one place aren't going to necessarily be the solutions in another place. That being said, there's a huge advantage to sharing best practices because you never know. Putting a flag on a honeybee hive, which is what the people in the great state of Mississippi have decided would be a good idea on a voluntary basis, that might actually work anywhere. Doesn't mean it has to work anywhere, but it's an idea that's certainly worth sharing with the other states and tribes because it might have play. That's not so geographic in its specific. Other states having registries where beekeepers report in where their hives are. That might work anywhere too. I don't know. But it's certainly worth getting together with people from across the country to share those ideas because you just never know what idea is actually, although it is a big country and it's hugely diverse, what's happening in North Dakota might actually work in some cases in Georgia, maybe not, but it's definitely worth exploring it. So I applaud all of you. Like I said, I am extraordinarily optimistic seeing the seriousness with which all of you are engaged in this issue. I want to thank in particular my state colleagues for the robustness of your participation, my state and tribal colleagues. I think that you are going to be the ones who ultimately are going to be the key to bringing this all together. And a big part of that key is making sure that everybody who needs to be at that table that you're going to convene is at the table. I'll just leave with one last, and this is an observation. This is not me speaking as a regulator. I'll be out of here in 11 months. Don't worry. My successor will have to worry about your success. I'll be watching from the sidelines, reading in the newspaper every day about what you're up to. But this is an observation of mine. And it's just sort of what I've observed on issues associated with pesticides in the United States. So we, the United States government, have said, this isn't an observation, this is actually what we, the United States government, said, that there are multiple factors affecting honeybee health in the United States, and Ted sort of walked them through, and they involve the varroa mite and other parasites and disease and habitat, and oh yeah, pesticides are having an impact too. All those factors. We haven't tried to sort of, rank them or anything, but there are all these factors. I guarantee you that unless we solve the problem being the honeybee health issues. The honeybee are not as healthy as we would like them to be. This is the observational part. Unless we solve that problem, the heat will not come off pesticides in the public eye as the problem. That is what the public thinks. If you don't believe that, sort of read the newspaper, get out and talk to people, and not just in agriculture. The public thinks it's pesticides. They will continue to think that unless we solve the problem. The only way out of the box is to solve the problem. Otherwise, the public will continue to believe the issue is pesticides. That's just an observation of mine. I could be wrong, but I just want to leave that with you, and thank you for all of your time, your energy, and I think you'll probably have a very productive day and a half. Thanks.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I want to thank all three of our introductory speakers. Those were all essentially perfect encapsulations of what we're trying to do and what we're trying to accomplish here. So I really appreciate that. Now we're going to move to the first introductory session. And Stacy, I'm going to try to do this, but you're probably going to have to intervene. Yeah. So I think
Yours is first.
Now, am I introducing Mike, or are we self-introduced, right?
Is Mike going first?
Yeah, so Michael Goodis is up first. There he is, okay.
Great, thanks. So, all right, I think that's it. All right, so good morning. Yes, my name is Mike Goodis. I'm with the EPA Office of Pesticide Programs and the Pesticide Reevaluation Division. I've been working in that division now for dealing with regulatory risk management decision-making for conventional pesticides for about 19 years now. It really sneaks up on you at times. But really looking forward to, as everybody else has been saying, the, sorry, better. Better. Okay. Really looking forward to the next day and a half and the discussions with everyone here. Like everyone else, and especially the EPA, we're very interested in the development and success of pollinator protection plans. And I think the session is I think, going to be well structured in that there's going to be, I think, a pretty healthy exchange of information. And I'm pretty sure from looking around the room, there are some people that are not bashful and aren't fearful of holding back. So I think we're going to have a nice, lively discussion during the next day and a half. So what I want to talk a little bit about is basically, the EPA's perspective on the importance and the role of pollinator protection plans. So I'll give a little background of pollinator issues, which led to the presidential directive, which also led to the federal strategy and some of the direction from that, and then also some of the activities and the work that have been taking place and EPA's role as far as promoting pollinator protection plans. So I think probably many of you have already seen a lot of this information. This just kind of tee things up, but survey information has shown that since the 1940s, there's probably been a decline of about over 50% of colonies in the United States, most notably the introduction of varroa mites in the 1980s. But at least in the last 20 years or so, it does appear that things have leveled off for the most part, but there are still concerns overall for pollinator health. One of the other areas that's of particular interest is also overwintering loss. And so here's survey information for the last 10 years showing that while the blue line is basically based on a survey information from beekeepers saying what is generally sustainable, about 15% overwintering loss, what we're generally seeing is somewhere uppers in the 30 to 35% overall. So with that information and a whole host of other information regarding pollinator health, led the president to issue a memorandum directing federal agencies to work together, which formed a task force to identify actions and measures that the federal government can take to improve pollinator health. In that memorandum also, there is specific direction to the EPA to work with tribes and state agencies to promote pollinator protection plans, largely built on the success of some of the state plans that had already been developed at that time, most notably of North Dakota, Mississippi, Florida, Colorado, and California. So coming away from that, there was a federal task force that was co-chaired by USDA and EPA, pulling together other federal agencies to come up with a strategy on what actions, what contributions can these federal agencies do to help promote and protect pollinators. It's broken down into 4 general categories, but there are commitments from each federal agency. Some are, for some agencies, it's more directed towards pollinator or habitat protection and development. There's also a pretty aggressive pollinator research plan also to identify what are affecting pollinators and how can we improve their health. There's also education outreach efforts, and along with that, the encouragement of public and private partnerships. Lots of P's. So if you read the strategy, there's generally overarching goals. And the first one kind of gets back to why I had the slide before, is concerned over overwintering loss. And so within the next 10 years, they want to try to bring, through these efforts, try to bring down the overwintering loss to, again, what was viewed as more of a sustainable level of about 15% per year. There's also an effort to improve the population of monarch butterflies in the country as well, trying to reach somewhere north of 200 million by the year 2020. I'm not sure who actually counts all those butterflies, but I'm sure that's an interesting profession. And then also improving, and this is where it gets into the public-private partnerships of expanding and improving pollinator habitat. Now, if you look at the strategy, each federal agency has certain commitments associated with them, and there are metrics to measure their progress. Specifically for the EPA, we do have a number of actions that we're following up on. In addition to what we're talking about here about encouraging pollinator protection plans, we also had initiated an effort to help reduce the exposure of pollinators to toxic pesticides, which I'll talk a little bit about. But there are other things too, such as improving and advancing our methodologies for assessing effects on pollinators. We're also looking at and trying to accelerate the registration or the registration process for new products that could be used to help protect pollinators against pests such as mites. And there's also efforts looking at our own federal properties, whether properties that we occupy or projects that we oversee, such as Superfund projects to improve pollinator habitat. So specifically, as I mentioned, there was an effort, and I'm sure many of you are familiar about the EPA's acute mitigation policy that was issued about a year or so ago. So our approach for this was really sort of a complementary two-prong approach. One, looking at areas where pollination hives are being brought in the field for professional pollination services under contract for certain crops while those crops are in bloom. And in that instance, we're looking at prohibiting the application of toxic pesticides during that time because we know the bees are present in the field. Complementary to that, we're looking at for all other applications, we're relying on the development of pollinator protection plans and the collaboration between applicators and beekeepers in the area to work out solutions so that pesticides can still be applied, but also safe to pollinators. So we issued this proposal back in May of last year, and we got a few comments on that, just a few. I think it was a little over 113,000. Imagine our surprise. So it's not as bad as it looks. Most of those comments, a large number, are actually from letter writing campaigns, which is fine. It's useful information. We do have about, I think we identified a little over about 450 comments that we're referring to as unique comments that are a little more comprehensive and thorough in the information. And quite frankly, reading through them were very informative and very useful for us. So we're going through that process of reviewing those comments. Specifically, comments on MP3s, we did have, while most of the comments are directed on the acute mitigation proposal, we did ask for feedback on the reliance of pollinator protection plans. And so regarding those comments, I think in general, they were pretty supportive of what we were proposing. I think they identified that, again, it provided that flexibility for states and tribes to develop solutions for their own particular areas, and the reliance on best management practices that can be effective to address these issues. Alternatively, for those that were not supportive, I think they were generally looking for more of a federal type of plan, overarching plan, which again generally doesn't provide this sort of flexibility. But also there was some concerns about how would these plans be implemented and how would they be enforced? So some other general themes too, I think we've heard pretty consistently too, is regarding funding. Is there money available for developing these plans? And how would these plans be sort of evaluated as far as their effectiveness going forward? So the agency's position is generally that we wanted to provide sort of this flexibility to allow for products that are, that can be used for situations where, commercial pollination is not necessary or not on a contract. And so, and specifically there's 5 minutes, I'd find out. All right, so there's, I think we recognize that, as mentioned before, we have a very diverse country. Every area is a little bit different. So we wanted to provide that flexibility to address and allow stakeholders to identify what are the concerns in the area and what's the best way to deal with them. We also indicated that, the plans are not a one-stop shop. So you can modify the plan, you can expand the scope of the plan to address areas that you think are more important for your particular area. And so I think that flexibility, I think we're going to be talking about a fair amount today, I think is really critical for the success of these plans. So from the very beginning, I think we recognized we really need to establish partnerships with organizations such as APCO and SPIREG, and also the Tribal Pesticide Program Council. And I think that's been very successful so far. We participated in the development and provided input such as the SPIREG guidance, and I think we'll be talking a little bit more about that. Steve will talk a little bit more about that later. Regarding our discussions with the TPPC, there we're trying to explore opportunities where tribes can perhaps participate in a state process, either in a stakeholder engagement process or either in part or in whole adopting plans where possible to help with resource concerns. We've also participated with APCO and SPIREG in identifying what kind of measures can be considered to be included in a plan, and I think we're going to be talking about that too. And there'll be a breakout session on that later today also. So, we're looking to monitor the success of these plans going forward from that information. And I think, we recognize this is not a flip of a switch. It's going to take time to develop and to see the progress. But pretty much so far, I think we've been very encouraged about the participation. So, again, the MP3s, again, I think are really very unique and I think very critical and important for improving pollinator health. I think that in one area, it really raises the awareness of the issue among stakeholders. Again, as I mentioned before, I think it really does provide the flexibility for states and tribes to solve the issues that's unique for their region. But it also, I think, promotes sort of that collaboration, and I think buy-in also from the stakeholders, which I think is really key for this to be successful. So we know a lot of states are a lot further along than others, and that's fine. Some are taking more of a voluntary approach. Some have sort of requirements, regulatory requirements part of it. Again, that flexibility, whatever works best, I think is really a solution that really needs to come together from the stakeholder discussion. So we're really encouraged by the progress so far. I think Steve will be talking about sort of the status of where the states are as far as developing these plans, but quite frankly, from that information we've seen so far, it's been very optimistic so far. So next steps, again, getting back to the acute mitigation policy. We're reviewing the comments. I don't know if I mentioned we had about 113,000 comments, and so we're still going through those. We don't have a timeline yet and when that's going to be completed, but we're expecting sometime later this year. And we're continuing to work with states and tribes in promoting pollinator plans, and such as participating and co-sponsoring this symposium as well. And the one thing that I think we want to try to get out of this also is to have a dialogue or identify areas where EPA can better support this process. Other than funding. I know funding is a big one. I am not the money man, I can't answer those questions, but if there are other ways that EPA can help, please let's have that discussion. So I think that's it. Here's some contact information. I'd just like to point out Marietta Echeverria, who's my co-lead as far as the acute policy paper and these efforts here as well. So feel free to contact either one of us. So that's it. I don't know.
Yeah, and we're going to do a sort of a joint question answer session when we're done here. So. Try to wind up here. here. Yeah. Okay. I'm Steve Dwinell with Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, and been involved in managed pollinator protection plans for quite a few years now, starting in Florida, but also serving as the co-chair for a committee that the Association of American Pesticide Control Officials have on managed pollinator protection plans. So that's one of the reasons I'm here. And what I'm going to do is sort of build on what Mike was talking about on why they're important and how EPA is looking at these plans, to talk about where we're at. Of course, you know about that. And Mike alluded to this too, but prior to the finalization of the national strategy, EPA reached out to the state lead agencies through SFIREG and APCO to work on these managed pollinator protection plans. Over the course of the dialogue and building up to the national strategy, we had a lot of conversations with EPA and USDA and other stakeholders about what was happening at the state level in quite a few states where, just a sort of almost a grassroots effort, the beekeepers, the crop producers, and the regulatory agencies had recognized that they needed to do something. And, it was interesting that in the 5 states that we really looked at, they all essentially did the same thing, which is they had meetings between the beekeepers and the crop producers and developed a plan. And it was they almost had identical experiences. So that was really interesting. So we sort of put all this together and, through SFIREG and APCO, put some documents together, sort of encapsulated what an MP3 was. And this is, one of the multiple statements about what an MP3 is. And I won't read it, and you can read it yourself. But, it's basically a way to get the people who manage pollinators and the people who grow the crops to work together to both do what they need to do. I think Director McKinney, said it very well this morning. We all have to work together. This has to be collaborative. And Jim Jones said it, I thought, very well too, that, if we don't solve this problem together, it's not going to get solved and we're all going to regret it. So we're trying our best to solve it. The EPA document that Mike talked about, specifically called out managed pollinator protection plans as a way to mitigate risk to pollinators. It was identified in the document and laid out as a possible way to go forward on this. This is some of the language from the policy itself, that the plans serve as examples of effective collaboration between stakeholders at the local level. That's exactly what we're trying to do here. And that's the reason we're all here today, is to keep that process going and to get better at it. SFIREG, which you may or may not be familiar with, but SFIREG, I'm not going to define the acronym because it's kind of tedious. But the point is, it's a mechanism for state lead pesticide agencies to talk to EPA about pesticide issues. And in that mechanism, and the chair of SFIREG is sitting right here, Carrie Jagir, so he can tell you all about it if you want to know more about it. But basically, they developed a guidance document for states on how to develop MP3s. And these are the elements that were identified in that document: that it's a public stakeholder participation process. It's a method for growers and applicators, beekeepers to locate and contact each other. Includes recommendations on how to minimize risk of pesticides to bees, our best management practices tailored for each situation, essentially. A clearly defined plan for public outreach about it, and then a mechanism to measure the effectiveness of the MP3 to mitigate the risk to pollinators, and periodically review and modify the plan. And that's a big part of it, and we're going to spend a lot of time here over the next day and a half talking about effectiveness. We have 2 breakout sessions just on that. Let's see. So just to sort of jump to the chase here, where are we at with managed pollinator protection plans? There are several groups, NASDA, APCO, CropLife America, and RISE, that have been trying to get a handle on how many MP3s, what the status of MP3s are around the country. And the groups have gotten together to share information and sort of standardize the type of information being collected. Jeanette Klopshin, where's Jeanette? Oh, there she is, has been taking the lead on this. Jeanette's with the Department of Agriculture in Florida, and she's a full-time pollinator protection specialist for us. And she's been taking advantage of some of the work done by the other groups and putting together into a single source where we're at on managed pollinator protection plans across the country. Now, we have data for all 50 states. We are lacking data on the tribal plans, and I've already talked to Fred about that. If you're involved in a tribal plan, and Fred will get you together with Jeanette, we'll get that information and Jeanette can start entering that information. So for the information that we have, these are the sort of the states that those plans are in. They're completed or amending. They're fully complete. They're in final review. They're in progress. They're in draft form. They're to be developed, but not yet started, or no plan will be developed. And some of the things that are being tracked in this effort are what is the lead agency, who's the contact person, and the information for them, the status of the plan, what type of stakeholder engagement process there is, whether or not an apiary registry is part of the system, whether or not a mapping service to facilitate communication notification is part of it, the target groups for the best management practices that are incorporated in the plan, the types of best management practices, evaluation measures, and then hopefully a link directly to the plan. So a lot of information that is being gathered and will be real useful as we go forward. So based on what we know so far, there are 7 states that have what can be categorized as complete plans. Arizona, Colorado, Florida, Georgia, Mississippi, North Dakota, and Tennessee. And the reason Mississippi and North Dakota are highlighted is because as Jeanette's been going through these plans, a lot of the plans seem to follow the template of either Mississippi or North Dakota. So you're kind of like the trendsetters here, which makes sense because they're some of the first plans. So that's an interesting observation. There are 9 states where a plan is in a state of final review: California, Delaware, Indiana, Maine, Montana, Nevada, Utah, and Wisconsin, and Wyoming. And Wisconsin is called out, I believe, Jeanette, because it is because of the way it's formatted. Is that? Yeah, it covers all crops. Yeah. So again, it could be kind of a sort of a trendsetter in the way plans are being developed. 20 states, I won't read them off, are the ones that are in some stage of development. Then we have 13 states that intend to develop a plan but haven't started working on it yet. And then we have 4 states that have communicated that they don't intend to develop a plan. And then Texas and Minnesota have plans that are, when it says outside the agriculture, I think you mean outside the Department of Agriculture. Some of the tools that have been used in the MP3s that have been evaluated, as far as a method for growers, applicators, beekeepers to locate and contact each other, there are 5 states that use basically an independent or a state-based system developed in the state. There are, I think it's 9 states that are using DriftWatch as a mechanism. And then about 30% of the states have no mapping system as part of their plan. We are going to have a breakout session tomorrow just on mapping and tracking systems too, in case anybody wants to learn more about those. Communication tools include sample contracts and notification forms, stakeholder meetings with a defined process, and then a public comment process, and publication of agendas, notices, and that kind of thing. So once the data is at a stage that we can post it, it will be hosted on the APCO website, easy URL, apco.com, under hot topics, and it'll be updated as needed. And of course, this slide was produced for another meeting, so we talked about the MP3 Symposium. While you're here, if you want to update any of your information with Jeanette, this is a great opportunity to do it. She's brought her laptop with her, all 20 pounds of it, and she can update the data right here. So some of the BMPs that have been found in there are to minimize the risk of pesticides are the notifications and communication guidelines, hive locations, identification, moving hives when needed, label interpretations and guidance, product formulation and application recommendations, adoption of IPM and use of crop advisors, bee kill reporting, recommendations on safe use of in-hive pesticides, recommendations for maximizing pollinator health, and outreach on how to spreading the word on these BMPs. And I think I'm going to go ahead and we're going to talk about measuring success. That's a big part of it. There are states are already starting down the road of trying to measure success by doing state surveys within the state on information, what people know about the MP3s and how they're using them. Florida, North Carolina, Mississippi have done that. Hawaii and Wisconsin did a survey before MP3 development. And that's it for now. So with that, that's sort of where we're at, nationally with MP3s, which is a major improvement from a year ago when I think we had 20 states that had, or 23, something like that, states that had some kind of a plan in progress. So we've had significant activity since then. So with that, I guess we have time for some questions and answers. If anybody has any questions about either Mike or my presentation.
Please raise your hand if you have a question, and we'll bring a mic over to you. Questions for Steve or Mike?
I guess we did such a good job. No questions. Either that or everybody's ready for a break.
Got one down there.
Yeah.
Don't leave.
Oh, thank you. This question goes to Mike. Mike, thanks for your comments and for the approach here. Always with the idea of being respectful but direct, I want to ask a question. Okay. My read on your plan says you're ready to take action before the state plans even have a chance to work. So what assurances do we have that later this year, before most of the plans are even finished, we're not going to be seeing some more, I'll be kind, prescriptive pesticide use reduction or elimination program before the plans get started? I don't understand the timing, okay?
Sure. Well, I think as was even something that Jim had brought up, I mean, there is a pretty much an urgency to get to make some efforts here to help protect pollinators. And while the pollinator protection plans, we're looking at those, considering those as very broad, covering nearly all pesticide application scenarios under the country, except for where bees are being brought in for commercial pollination services. Now, that was a proposal that we'd issued last May. And so, as you can imagine, we received a lot of comments on that particular scope of that proposal, specifically the commercial pollination. So we are looking at the comments. I can tell you there are a lot of comments regarding, and they're all in the public docket, looking at essentially what you're bringing up about can there be some flexibility in use of products in those situations as well? And I think there was a lot of very good information that's provided to the agency. We're looking at that, we're considering that. I can't say what our final decision will be on that, but in spite of that, still the use and I think the importance of pollinator protection plans, I think we really see the value of those as well. So depending on the scope of those compared with the mitigation proposal we have, there may be some changes going forward, but these things take a little bit of time, and in the meantime, I think we want to just, again, regardless, just have promote this dialogue and let states and tribes to figure out what's the best way to deal with those issues in their particular regions.
Right. The
I'm sorry.
Yeah, just as sort of a follow-up to that, the proposal, just so we're completely clear on it, was to add label restrictions in situations where bees, managed pollinators were brought in for contract pollination, but not add label restrictions outside that situation. So all the other non-contract pollination would not have label restrictions in the proposal. To me, that's significant. I mean, EPA has said in their proposal, which, we'll see what the final result is, but in the proposal, they adopted the approach of not adding label restrictions in situations where there were not contract pollination, which is a lot. Citrus in Florida is not contract pollination. It's honey production. So the proposal would not add label restrictions in that situation, which is, it's a significant investment in the whole idea of MP3s, to me. I think it's big news to me. I mean, you could have done something different.
We could, and we
And
did.
you still might.
And we did.
So just to be clear, is it the intention, is it the purpose, or is it even possible for an MP3 in a state to waive or mitigate or change or obviate labels restrictions that are on a particular registered product?
Yeah, no, there was, just to be clear, there was nothing in regards to the proposal we put forward that if you had a pollinator protection plan, that somehow that would negate the requirements that are on the label. The requirements on the label, that's the law, and so that needs to be followed. I think what we're looking at for pollinator protection plans are for, in those situations where there's a need to apply a pesticide, that the right stakeholders get together and figure out a way so that there's that a pesticide can be still applied but would not be harmful to bees. And so that's I think really the goal of these plans.
Good morning. This is Richard Gupson with the Ag Retailers Association. I wanted to thank NASDA and the Honeybee Health Coalition and USDA and for organizing the event. I think this is a helpful discussion. Hopefully we have a productive outcome after a day and a half here and get some states that aren't as far along, a little bit farther along through this process. So my question is for the states that are maybe not completed their plans, how do we find out the stakeholders that have been involved or may not be involved, and how, so we can plug in our group, the proper groups into that dialogue? I said you're going to post information on the website with maybe a primary contact, but is there a way to see who's already involved in those discussions?
The only way I can think of doing that is to contact the folks who are taking the lead and putting the plan together, and contact them to find out who's involved and who isn't. I mean, that information is essentially, some of it's available now on the EPCO website with the report that the Pollinator Committee did back in February. Is Jeanette still in the room? Looks like she stepped out. The website or the database that she's putting together should be posted fairly soon. I think she's just going through some final cleaning up, but hopefully fairly soon. And I don't want to put you guys on the spot, but you could probably link it to your website too. And, so that information should be widely available fairly soon. And if you have a specific question, you can always ask Jeanette while she's here.
Thank you. I have one other question, and Jim Jones has left, so he wasn't taking any questions, so I'll leave this up from what a comment he made. He said about the pesticide, some of it's perceived, maybe misinformation, or not the whole story maybe, is what he said on that as one of the aspects of pollinator health. And I was just wondering, EPA registers these products or re-registers these products after a thorough review using the best available science, ideally, is what the goal is. So why aren't they helping educate the public on these products that they've approved for use? And as long as the label's being followed, the law's being followed in a safe manner, why isn't the EPA more vocally defending the products that they've registered and re-registered and help educate the public and provide accurate information?
I think we're often in a position of having to defend our decisions and that the products that we register are safe. It is a challenge. I mean, it's no doubt about that. I mean, I think we often talk about how, even just the social media and the information that's passed around is really difficult to kind of counter. That in a lot of cases, it's not the pesticides that's really causing the problem, but there's an understanding that does play some role, and it really depends on how the pesticide's being used. I think, could we do better? We probably do that too, but I think we make, I think, a pretty significant effort to demonstrate through the science and our decisions that the decisions we make regarding the safety and use of pesticides are safe. And it's, it's very difficult to counter all the information that's out there. I mean, we get, there are multiple stories every day. There are multiple studies that are provided. It's hard to counter every single thing that comes across, our desk every single day.
Got two more over here.
Thank you. I'm Gene Brandy with the American Beekeeping Federation. The ABF believes that MP3s can be a good tool to help foster communication between applicators and beekeepers. And personally, I've been dealing with our California plan for over 40 years. I've been keeping bees in California since the 70s, and we do have a registration program where we can be notified of advance, 48 hours in advance of chemical applications. But it is the pesticide label that is the ultimate protection for our bees and other pollinators. And so a clear enforceable label is certainly important, and we don't want to forget that. Not that we want to add have any new restrictions added necessarily, but in some of the comments that were just made by Richard in the back, we have issues with some fungicides and IGRs, for example, that have no bee warning on them whatsoever. And we've got a situation in California almonds again this year. It's just come to light in the last week, and we're not exactly sure of the magnitude of the situation this year. We're not sure if it's going to be as bad as it was 2 years ago. But here we've got products where there's no notification required because there's no any kind of bee warning on the label whatsoever. And so we do think that is something that's very important to protect the bees. But we are supportive of the MP3 process, and we are essential components of the ag system. And we know that we are serving our ag, our growers that we pollinate for, and the people who allow us to put bees in their property just to find a safe place to put them, because that is becoming increasingly difficult to find safe, uncontaminated forage in this country. So anyway, we're supportive of the process, but we really do need effective, clear labeling as well.
Okay, thanks. There's another question back there. Okay, I think we're probably out of time. Yeah, thank you all very much. And we got a day and a half, so if you didn't get your question ask during the other session. I really encourage everyone to, talk. That's what we're here for. So anything we need to announce before we take a break? Or?
Yeah, we're going to take a break now. Please help yourself to some refreshments out there. We'll rejoin back in this room in 15 minutes at 10:35. And just before that, if I could have the speakers for the next session, please come up front here. Thanks so much.
Shy.